r/pettyrevenge cousin cut my pay in half, so I destroyed their reputation. The email notification popped up on my screen at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I almost ignored it. Almost. But something about seeing my cousin Derek's name in the sender field made my stomach twist. He never emailed me directly, usually just barked orders across the office or sent passive-aggressive Slack messages during business hours. Subject line, payroll error, please disregard. I clicked it open, expecting some generic HR nonsense. Instead, I found myself staring at what was clearly meant for the accounting firm handling our payroll. Derek had accidentally CC'd me on an email that was supposed to go only to them. Asterisk, please continue processing payment for my name at $2,800 per month as discussed. Do not send any documentation to employee address. We'll handle all communication internally as usual. D asterisk. $2,800. I read it 3 times before the number really sank in. $2,800 a month. Not the $5,500 we'd agreed on when Derek offered me this amazing opportunity at his boutique marketing firm 6 months ago. Not the salary I'd been budgeting my entire post-graduation life around. My hands actually started shaking as I scrolled through my banking app, adding up the deposits. Sure enough, $2,800 every month, direct deposited like clockwork. How had I not noticed? Because I'm an idiot, that's how. I'd been so grateful to land a job straight out of college, especially at Derek's supposedly booming agency, that I'd never bothered to do the math. The deposits were listed as net pay, and I just assumed the difference was taxes, insurance, the usual deductions. But even with deductions, the numbers didn't add up to a $55,000 salary. Not even close. I sat there in my crappy studio apartment, laptop burning my thighs, trying to wrap my head around it. Derek, my cousin Derek, who'd given the toast at my graduation party about family taking care of family, had been systematically stealing from me for 6 months. The worst part. I could hear his voice from last weekend's family barbecue, loud and performative as always. I'm basically mentoring her, you know. Could have hired someone with way more experience for what I'm paying, but family comes first, right? Everyone had nodded approvingly. My mom had actually teared up talking about how generous Derek was, how he was launching my career. My dad had pulled him aside to thank him for believing in me. All while he was pocketing nearly $1,700 of my salary every single month. I screenshotted the email and sat back, staring at the evidence. Part of me wanted to convince myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe there were legitimate deductions I didn't know about. Maybe this was temporary until some probationary period ended. But deep down, I knew better. This was Derek. The same Derek who charged his own grandmother rent to live in the house she'd left him. The same Derek who somehow always forgot his wallet when family went out to dinner but insisted on ordering the most expensive thing on the menu. The same Derek who'd been playing the role of successful entrepreneur while apparently running his business through wage theft. My phone buzzed. A text from my roommate asking if I'd be able to cover utilities this month since her hours got cut. I looked around my tiny apartment, at the ramen stacks on my counter, at the rejection letters from other jobs scattered across my desk, jobs I turned down because Derek convinced me this was such an incredible opportunity. That's when I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's smug face from the barbecue, basking in everyone's praise while knowing exactly what he was doing to me. By 6 a.m., I'd made a decision. I was going to confront him directly. Give him a chance to explain, maybe even fix this. Because despite everything, he was still family, and maybe there was some explanation I wasn't seeing. I got to the office early, before the rest of the team arrived. Derek was always in by 7:30, part of his whole entrepreneur grind set performance. I found him in his glass-walled corner office, already on a phone call, gesturing dramatically at his monitor. Told them we'd deliver the campaign by Friday, and we will. Excellence doesn't wait for excuses, you know what I mean. He spotted me hovering by his door and held up one finger. Listen, I've got to run. My star employee just walked in, the one I was telling you about. Yeah, the one I'm personally mentoring. Huge investment on my part, but that's what separates good leaders from great ones. My stomach churned. He hung up and flashed that practiced smile. Emma. You're here early. I love the initiative. What can I do for you? I clutched my phone, screenshot ready. I need to talk to you about my salary. His smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes. Your salary. What about it? I think there's been a mistake with payroll. I'm getting $2,800 a month instead of the $5,500 we agreed on. Derek leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all its warmth. There's no mistake, Emma. What do you mean there's no mistake? We shook hands on $55,000. I have texts where we discussed the salary. You have texts where we discussed a potential salary, Derek said slowly, like he was explaining something to a child. Before I evaluated your actual skill level and market value. This isn't charity work, it's business. The words hit me like a physical blow. You've been lying to me for 6 months. I've been paying you exactly what you're worth. Derek stood up, walking around his desk to lean against it. Look, Emma, I get it. You're young, you had unrealistic expectations about what entry-level positions pay. But the experience you're getting here. Working directly with me. That's worth more than any salary. You told my parents you were paying me well. You let them thank you. I never specified an amount to your parents. If they made assumptions, that's on them. Derek's expression hardened. And frankly, I'm a little disappointed by your attitude here. Do you know how many people would kill for this opportunity? I took a huge risk hiring someone with zero experience. My hands were shaking again. This isn't about experience. This is about you lying to me. I didn't lie about anything. Derek moved closer, and I caught a whiff of his expensive cologne, the kind I definitely couldn't afford on my real salary. I gave you a job when no one else would. I've been teaching you, investing my time in your development. And this is how you repay me. By storming into my office making accusations. It's not an accusation if it's true. Derek's mask finally slipped completely. You know what? You're right. Let's call it exactly what it is. I pay you $2,800 a month because that's what you're worth to this company. If you don't like it, there's the door. But I promise you won't find anything better out there, not with your attitude, and definitely not with the recommendation you'd get from me. The threat hung in the air between us like poison. That's when I realized Derek wasn't just a thief. He was a predator. I stared at Derek for a long moment, watching him straighten his tie with that same smug expression he wore at family dinners. The threat was clear: play along with his exploitation or lose everything. My job, my reference, probably my reputation in our small professional circle. He had all the power, and he knew it. I need some time to think about this, I said quietly. Derek's smile returned, sickeningly sweet. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Emma. He placed a patronizing hand on my shoulder. Don't let pride get in the way of a good thing. This is still the best opportunity you're going to get. I nodded and walked out, my legs feeling like jelly. The rest of the team was filtering in: Sarah from account management, Mike from creative, Jessica from social media. All of them probably making their proper salaries while I'd been working for scraps. I spent the day going through the motions, but my mind was racing. Every time Derek walked past my desk, every time he made small talk about weekend plans or complimented my work, I felt sick. How long had he been planning this? Had he always intended to underpay me, or was it something he'd decided after I'd already started? Around lunch, I decided to do some digging. I pulled up the company's LinkedIn page and started cross-referencing our team with salary websites. The numbers I found made my blood boil. Sarah, with just 2 years more experience than me, was likely making at least $65,000. Mike had posted about his new car last month, definitely not a $2,800 a month car. But the real kicker came when I stumbled across Derek's personal Instagram story from last weekend. Photos from some upscale restaurant downtown, bottles of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, him and his girlfriend at what looked like a spa resort. The caption read, "Working hard so we can play hard. Hashtag blessed, hashtag entrepreneur life, hashtag building empire." Building his empire on stolen wages, apparently. That afternoon, Derek called a team meeting. As we all gathered in a conference room, he launched into one of his typical motivational speeches about exceeding client expectations and the family atmosphere that makes this place special. "We're not just colleagues here," he said, making eye contact with each of us. "We're family. And family takes care of each other." I actually laughed. Out loud. Everyone turned to look at me. "Sorry," I said, not feeling sorry at all. Just thinking about something funny. Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "As I was saying, we've got the Morrison account review coming up next week, and I need everyone giving their absolute best effort. Emma, I'm putting you on point for the social media strategy." After the meeting, Sarah caught up with me by the coffee machine. "You okay? You seemed, I don't know, off today." I studied her face, wondering if she knew. Wondering if any of them knew what Derek was doing to me. "Can I ask you something? Hypothetically." "Sure. If you found out someone you trusted was screwing you over, like, really screwing you over, what would you do?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Hypothetically. I'd probably screw them back, but harder." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Why? Someone screwing you over?" Before I could answer, Derek appeared beside us like a shark smelling blood. "Ladies. Hope you're not gossiping when we've got deadlines looming." His tone was light, but his eyes were fixed on me with laser focus. "Just discussing the Morrison project," I lied smoothly. "Excellent. Emma, actually, can I see you in my office for a quick chat about your approach?" It wasn't really a question. As I followed him back to his glass cage, I caught sight of my reflection in the window, pale, tired, younger than my 24 years. I looked like exactly what I was, someone being taken advantage of. But as Derek closed his office door behind us, I realized something had shifted inside me. I was done being a victim. "Sit down, Emma." Derek's voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "I think we need to have another conversation about your attitude today." I remained standing. My attitude? The laughing in the meeting. The whispered conversations with Sarah. "I'm getting the impression you're not taking our earlier discussion to heart." He moved to his desk, pulling out a manila folder. "So I thought I'd help clarify your situation." Derek opened the folder and slid a document across his desk. My employment contract. The one I'd signed 6 months ago in this very office, too excited and grateful to read the fine print. "Page 3, Section 2.1, he said, pointing with his expensive pen. "Salary subject to performance review and adjustment during probationary period. Probationary period extends through first 12 months of employment." My stomach dropped as I read the clause. It was right there in black and white, buried in legal jargon I'd been too naive to understand. The contract gave him the right to adjust my salary for any reason during my first year. "You see, Emma, everything I've done is perfectly legal. More than legal, it's generous. I could have started you at minimum wage and worked up from there." Derek leaned back in his chair, completely in control. "But I chose to invest in you. To give you a chance. By lying about what you pay me. By giving you exactly what this contract states I'd pay you. Your mistake was making assumptions." I stared at the document, my hands clenched into fists. He'd played this perfectly. Made me feel grateful for an opportunity that was really just exploitation with a legal loophole. "Now," Derek continued, "I'm willing to overlook today's outburst. But I need to know you're committed to this team. To this family. Because if you're not, well." He gestured toward the door. "I'd hate to have to tell your parents that their daughter couldn't handle the professional world. Especially after they've been bragging to everyone about your big job." The mention of my parents hit exactly where he'd aimed it. Mom had already told her entire book club about my successful marketing career. Dad had been dropping Derek's company name at his office, proud that his daughter was making it in the business world. "Think about what you're giving up," Derek pressed. "The experience, the connections, the references. All for what? A few extra dollars that you'll probably just waste anyway. That's when it hit me. Derek wasn't just stealing my wages, he was stealing my entire future. Every day I stayed here under these conditions, I was falling further behind where I should be professionally. Other companies would expect someone with my experience level to be earning market rate, not whatever crumbs Derek decided to throw my way. But something else occurred to me as I stood there watching his self-satisfied expression. Derek was talking like he held all the cards, but he'd just made a crucial mistake. He'd shown me the contract. Which meant he was worried. Really worried. People who hold all the power don't usually feel the need to pull out legal documents to intimidate their victims. They certainly don't call special meetings to remind said victims how generous they're being. Derek was scared I might actually do something about this. You're right, I said finally. I have been unprofessional today. I apologize. Derek's posture relaxed slightly. I'm glad we understand each other. We do. Completely. I headed toward the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. Just out of curiosity, does the Morrison account know about your company's compensation philosophy? I imagine they'd be interested in how you manage overhead costs. Derek's face went white. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all. Just thinking about their emphasis on ethical business practices. You know how corporate clients can be about their vendor relationships these days. I left him sitting there, and for the first time in 6 months, I felt like I could breathe properly. Derek thought he'd cornered me with that contract. But he'd actually just handed me the key to everything. The rest of the week passed in a strange kind of calm. Derek kept shooting me suspicious glances, but he didn't push any further confrontations. I think my parting comment about the Morrison account had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. Good. Let him sweat a little. But by Friday afternoon, I realized Derek wasn't just sweating, he was preparing. I was staying late to finish the Morrison social media proposal when I heard voices coming from Derek's office. The door was cracked open, and I could see him on a video call with someone I didn't recognize. A middle-aged woman in a sharp business suit, sitting in what looked like a corporate conference room. Appreciate you taking the time, Janet. I know how busy you are. Of course, Derek. So what's this about? You mentioned some concerns about team dynamics. My blood turned to ice. I crept closer to the door, keeping out of sight. Well, it's a delicate situation, Derek was saying in his most professional voice. I have a junior employee who's been struggling lately. Performance issues, attitude problems. I've been trying to mentor her through it, but I'm starting to worry about her stability. Oh. What kind of stability issues? Paranoid thinking, mostly. She's convinced there are problems with her compensation that simply don't exist. Yesterday she actually accused me of, well, let's just say the accusations were completely baseless but quite concerning. The woman frowned. That does sound troubling. Have you considered that she might be dealing with personal issues? Substance abuse? Mental health problems? Derek nodded gravely. That's exactly what I'm worried about. She's been acting erratic, making veiled threats about our clients. I'd hate to see her damage her career over whatever she's going through, but I also have to protect my business. Of course. Are you documenting everything? Absolutely. I've got records of our conversations, her performance issues, the inappropriate behavior. If I need to terminate her, I want to make sure everything's above board. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. Derek wasn't just stealing from me, he was building a case to destroy my reputation entirely. By Monday, there would probably be a paper trail painting me as unstable, paranoid, maybe even dangerous. But then the woman on the call said something that made me freeze. Well, I appreciate the heads up, Derek. Morrison Industries takes these things very seriously, especially when it comes to our marketing partners. We can't afford any PR disasters. Morrison Industries. Derek was talking to someone from Morrison Industries. He was preemptively sabotaging me with our biggest client. Janet, I want to assure you that this won't impact our campaign delivery at all, Derek continued smoothly. I'm handling her work personally now to make sure everything meets your standards. In fact, removing her from the account might actually improve our output quality. That's good to hear. Send me those performance documentation files when you get a chance. If she's as unstable as you're suggesting, we need to make sure Morrison's interests are protected. The call ended, and I heard Derek's chair creak as he leaned back. Through the crack in the door, I could see him smiling, actually smiling, as he typed something on his computer. I backed away from his office on shaking legs, my mind racing. This wasn't just about money anymore. Derek was systematically destroying my career before I even had a chance to fight back. By Monday, Morrison would think I was some kind of unhinged employee who'd made baseless accusations against my generous mentor. Worse, he was creating a narrative that would follow me anywhere I tried to work in this industry. Unstable. Paranoid. Inappropriate. Those words would poison any reference check, any networking opportunity, any chance I had of building the career I'd worked so hard for. I gathered my things and left the office, but instead of going home, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd just heard. Derek had just declared war. The question was, did he have any idea what he was fighting? I drove home in a haze, Derek's voice echoing in my head. Asterisk unstable. Paranoid. Baseless accusations, asterisk by the time I pulled into my apartment complex, those words had crystallized into something sharp and focused. Derek wanted to play games. Fine. But he'd made one crucial error, he assumed I was as naive as I'd been 6 months ago. I spent the weekend doing research. Real research. The kind I should have done before taking this job, but had been too grateful and trusting to bother with. What I found made Derek's wage theft look like pocket change. First, I pulled up the company's business registration and tax filings. All public record, perfectly legal to access. Derek's boutique agency had reported significantly higher revenues than made sense for our tiny team and client list. Either he was lying to the government about income, or lying to us about the company's actual size and success. Then I started digging into our client contracts. Derek had given me access to the Morrison files for the social media work, but I'd never looked at the actual billing statements before. The numbers made my stomach drop. We were charging Morrison $15,000 monthly for social media management. I was doing roughly 80% of that work. For my $2,800 salary, Derek was billing out my time at consultant rates and pocketing the difference. We weren't just talking about wage theft anymore, this was a systematic scam. But the real bombshell came when I cross-referenced our team size against Derek's LinkedIn posts about company growth. 6 months ago, he posted about expanding the team to meet growing demand. 3 months ago, he'd shared an article about scaling boutique agencies, with the comment, speaking from experience, growth requires investment in top talent. Except we hadn't grown. If anything, we'd shrunk. Jenny from graphic design had quit in July, and Derek never replaced her, just distributed her work among the rest of us. But according to his public posts, we were supposedly this thriving, expanding agency. I screenshot everything. Every LinkedIn post, every public filing, every billing statement I had access to. Then I started mapping out Derek's network of lies. The picture that emerged was breathtaking in its audacity. Derek had been running an elaborate shell game for months, maybe years. Inflating revenue numbers, exaggerating team size, underpaying employees while billing them out at premium rates. He was essentially running a one-man show while presenting himself as the head of a growing agency. And our family had bought every word of it. Sunday evening, I got a text from my mom, *, Derek mentioned you might be struggling with the workload. Are you okay? He seemed worried about you. *. My blood boiled. He was already starting his campaign, planting seeds with my own family. Making himself look like the concerned mentor while positioning me as the problem employee who couldn't handle the pressure. I was typing a response when another text came in, *, maybe you should talk to someone. Derek said sometimes young professionals get overwhelmed in their first real job. *. Sometimes young professionals get overwhelmed. I deleted my half-written response and typed back, *, I'm fine, Mom. Just working through some challenges. Derek's been very educational. *. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to slink away while Derek painted me as unstable to anyone who would listen. And I definitely wasn't going to let him continue this scam with the next naive college graduate who walked through his door. Derek thought he was playing chess, moving pieces around the board while I stumbled around like a confused pawn. But he'd overlooked one critical factor: I had nothing left to lose. Monday morning, I walked into the office with a smile on my face and a plan in my heart. Derek looked surprised to see me cheerful, probably expecting me to come in defeated or not show up at all. Good morning, Derek, I called out brightly. Ready for a great week? His expression was priceless. Confused, wary, like a predator who'd suddenly realized his prey might have teeth. Yes. Of course. Emma, about Friday. Oh, don't worry about that, I interrupted, settling at my desk. I've had time to think over the weekend. You're absolutely right about everything. Derek's relief was visible. I'm glad you understand. I know it seemed harsh, but not harsh at all. Educational. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Morrison files. In fact, I learned so much this weekend. About business, about professionalism, about how the industry really works. Something in my tone made Derek pause. What do you mean? I looked up at him with my brightest smile. Just that I'm ready to take my work here to the next level. Starting today. Derek hovered by my desk for a few more seconds, clearly unsettled by my sudden attitude shift, but eventually retreated to his office. I could feel him watching me through his glass walls as I dove into what looked like normal Monday morning work. But I wasn't doing normal work. I was executing phase 1. I started with the Morrison account, pulling up every file Derek had ever given me access to. Social media analytics, campaign performance data, client communication threads, all of it technically within my job scope, so nothing Derek could question if he noticed. But I wasn't looking at it from an employee perspective anymore. I was looking at it like an investigator. The first red flag jumped out within minutes. Derek had been telling Morrison that their social media engagement rates were up 340% since we took over their account. I'd been tracking those numbers myself for months, the real increase was maybe 40%. I pulled up the actual analytics dashboard and screenshot the discrepancy. Then I found something even better buried in an email thread from last month. Derek had promised Morrison a dedicated team of social media specialists working exclusively on their account. The email specifically mentioned our social media department head and junior specialists focusing on content creation and community management. It was just me. It had always been just me, plus whatever scraps of work I could pawn off on Jessica when she had spare time. Derek was charging them for an entire department that didn't exist. My phone buzzed with a Slack message from Derek, *, how's the Morrison work coming along? Need anything? *. I typed back, *, going great. Just reviewing some of our past performance metrics to make sure we're on track. The numbers are really interesting. *. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Derek was typing and deleting, probably trying to figure out what I meant by interesting. Finally, *, don't get too bogged down in old data. Focus on this week's deliverables. *. Of course. But I think Morrison would love to see how much we've grown their engagement. 340% is incredible, right? The 3 dots appeared and disappeared for a full minute before Derek responded, *, let's discuss metrics in person. My office in 10. I smiled at my screen. He was panicking. But before I could respond, my computer pinged with a new email notification. From Jessica in social media, *, hey Emma, can you help me understand something? Derek asked me to pull together a team overview for Morrison, but I'm confused about the org chart he sent. It lists people I've never heard of. My heart started racing. Derek wasn't just creating fake performance metrics, he was fabricating an entire fake team structure. I quickly typed back, *, can you forward me that org chart? I want to make sure my part is accurate. *. Her response came within seconds, and what I saw made my jaw drop. Derek had created an elaborate organizational chart showing our social media department with 8 employees. 8. There were only 5 people in the entire company, and 3 of us barely touched social media. He'd listed me as Social Media Specialist 2 under someone called Maria Santos, Social Media Director. There was no Maria Santos. He'd also created fake profiles for Content Creator, Jake Williams, and Community Manager, Sarah Chen, and several others. All completely fictional. But the truly breathtaking part was at the bottom of the org chart, a note explaining that this was our current structure as of Q3 expansion, with additional team members to be added in Q4 to support growing client demand. Derek wasn't just running a scam, he was running a full-scale fraud operation. And he was using Morrison's account to pitch them on services from people who literally didn't exist. My Slack pinged again, Emma. My office? I looked up to see Derek standing in his doorway, no longer trying to hide his anxiety. Behind him, I could see he had multiple windows open on his computer screen, probably scrambling to cover his tracks. But as I gathered my laptop and headed toward his office, I realized Derek had just handed me something more valuable than any evidence I could have gathered on my own. He was about to lie to my face while I had proof of exactly what he was lying about. And this time, I was going to be ready for him. I knocked on Derek's office door frame, laptop in hand, trying to keep my expression neutral despite my heart hammering against my ribs. "Close the door behind you," Derek said, not looking up from his screen. I could see him frantically clicking through what looked like spreadsheets, his jaw tight with concentration. As I settled into the chair across from his desk, Derek finally met my eyes. "So, you mentioned the Morrison metrics were interesting. What exactly did you mean by that?" I opened my laptop slowly, buying time. Through his glass office walls, I could see Jessica at her desk, probably still confused about that fake org chart. Sarah was on a phone call, gesturing animatedly. Mike was nowhere to be seen, probably at his usual extended coffee break. Well, I began carefully, I was just impressed by how well we've done for them. 340% engagement growth is remarkable for any agency. Derek's shoulders relaxed slightly. Yes, we've exceeded expectations. That's what happens when you have experienced leadership guiding strategy. Absolutely. And the team structure you've built is so comprehensive. I had no idea our social media department was so robust. The color drained from Derek's face. What do you mean? I angled my laptop screen toward him, displaying the org chart Jessica had forwarded. This is incredible. 8 specialists just for social media. Maria Santos sounds like an amazing director, I'd love to meet her sometime. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of his expensive air purifier and the muffled phone conversation from outside. "Where did you get that?" he finally managed. Jessica forwarded it to me. She was confused about some of the names and wanted to make sure she had everyone's information correct. I kept my voice innocent, concerned. "Is there a problem? Did I not get the memo about our new hires?" Derek's hand shot out, slamming my laptop closed. "That document is confidential. You had no business accessing it. But Jessica sent it directly to me. She said you asked her to." "I don't care what Jessica said." Derek's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "That org chart is part of a larger strategic presentation that's not meant for your level." My level. Even caught red-handed in fraud, he couldn't help being condescending. "I understand," I said, reopening my laptop. "But since I'm listed on here as Social Media Specialist 2, shouldn't I know who I'm supposed to be reporting to? I mean, if Maria Santos is my director." "Stop." Derek stood up abruptly, beginning to pace behind his desk. "You're misunderstanding what that document represents." "Help me understand then." Derek stopped pacing and stared at me for a long moment. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head, trying to calculate how much I knew versus how much he could get away with explaining. "That's a projection," he said finally. "A roadmap for where we're planning to grow the team over the next quarter. We're in the process of hiring those positions." "Oh." I made my voice bright with understanding. "So when you sent this to Morrison, you were showing them our future structure?" "Exactly. But the metrics I was looking at, the 340% engagement growth, that's based on our current team's work, right? Before we hire all these new people." Derek's face went ashen as he realized the trap. If the metrics were real, then our tiny current team had achieved impossible results. If the metrics were fake, then he'd been lying to our biggest client about our performance. "Emma," he said slowly, "I think there's been some confusion about your role here." Before I could respond, there was a sharp knock on the office door. Through the glass, I could see Sarah holding her phone, looking agitated. "Derek," she called through the door. "I have Morrison's Janet Walsh on line 2. She says it's urgent." Derek and I stared at each other across his desk, both realizing that whatever game we'd been playing had just gotten very, very serious. The color completely drained from Derek's face as Sarah's words sank in. Janet Walsh. The same Janet Walsh he'd been video calling on Friday, the one he'd been feeding lies about my instability and baseless accusations. "Tell her I'll call her back in 5 minutes, Derek called out, his voice cracking slightly on the last word. Sarah nodded and disappeared from view, but I could see her through the glass walls, returning to her desk with a confused expression. She kept glancing back toward Derek's office, probably wondering why he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Derek slumped back into his chair, running his hands through his carefully styled hair. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely rattled, not just annoyed or inconvenienced, but actually scared. "This doesn't concern you," he said, but his usual commanding tone had evaporated into something that sounded almost pleading. "Doesn't it?" I kept my voice level, professional. "I mean, I am listed as the primary contact for Morrison's social media deliverables. If there's an urgent issue with the account, shouldn't I be involved in resolving it?" Derek's eyes darted between me and his phone, where the red light indicated Janet was still holding on line 2. I could practically see him calculating odds, trying to figure out damage control while I sat there with evidence of his fraudulent org chart still glowing on my laptop screen. "What exactly did you send to Morrison this weekend?" I asked quietly. "Nothing. I didn't send them anything. But even as he said it, Derek's eyes flicked toward his computer monitor, and I caught a glimpse of his email inbox. The preview pane showed a sent message timestamped Sunday at 11:47 p.m., the exact same time his original payroll email had been sent to me 6 months ago. Derek apparently did his shadiest work just before midnight. Derek. My voice was steady, but inside I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Janet Walsh is holding on the phone. Our biggest client has an urgent issue. And you're sitting here looking like you're about to have a panic attack. What did you do? For a moment, I thought he might actually tell me the truth. His mask had slipped so completely that he looked almost human, scared, overwhelmed, caught in a web of his own making. But then his phone buzzed with an internal call from Sarah. Derek? Janet says she really can't wait much longer. Should I tell her you're in a meeting? Derek closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and when he opened them again, the predator was back. Emma, here's what's going to happen, he said in a low, dangerous voice. You're going to forget about that org chart, forget about whatever numbers you think you found, and you're going to go back to your desk and do your actual job. Because if you don't, if you cause any problems with this client call, I will make sure you never work in marketing again. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Derek stood up, straightening his tie with shaking hands. I have connections across this entire industry. One phone call from me, and you'll be blacklisted from every agency in the city. I'll tell them you were fired for performance issues, for making false accusations against management, for sabotaging client relationships. His phone rang again. Sarah's voice came through the intercom, more urgent this time. Derek, Janet says she needs to speak with you immediately about some discrepancies in the monthly report. She sounds really upset. My stomach dropped as the pieces clicked together. Derek hadn't just sent Morrison the fake org chart, he'd sent them a doctored monthly report. Probably with those inflated engagement metrics, maybe with billing for services from his fictional employees. And somehow, Janet Walsh had figured out something was wrong. Derek grabbed his phone, his hand visibly trembling. But before he could pick up the call, I stood up and headed for his office door. Where are you going? I paused with my hand on the doorknob, looking back at him one final time. He looked pathetic sitting there, a small man who'd built his entire life on lies, finally watching it all crumble around him. To do my actual job, I said. Isn't that what you wanted? But as I stepped out of his office, I knew exactly what I was really about to do. And Derek wasn't going to like it. I made it halfway to my desk before Derek's voice stopped me cold. Emma, wait. I turned back to see him standing in his doorway, phone still in his hand, looking more desperate than I'd ever seen him. Through the glass walls, I could see Sarah watching our exchange with growing concern, her hand hovering over her own phone. I need to take this call, Derek said, his voice strained. But afterward, you and I are going to have a very serious conversation about your future here. Of course, I replied sweetly. Take all the time you need. As Derek disappeared back into his office and closed the door, I noticed something that made my pulse quicken. In his panic about the phone call, he'd left his computer unlocked and visible through the glass wall. I could see multiple browser windows open, email, some kind of financial software, and what looked like a document editing program. Sarah caught my eye and mouthed, "What's going on?" while pointing toward Derek's office. Through the glass, we could see him pacing as he spoke, his free hand gesticulating wildly. Client emergency, I whispered back, settling at my desk but positioning myself so I could still observe Derek's office. Morrison's not happy about something. That was an understatement. Even through his closed door, Derek's voice was getting louder and more agitated. I caught fragments, misunderstanding about the metrics, and can explain the discrepancies, and most tellingly, absolutely not intentional. Jessica looked up from her computer. Is it just me, or has Derek been acting really weird lately? Like, weirder than usual? Before I could respond, Mike finally returned from his coffee run, immediately picking up on the tense atmosphere. Why does Derek look like he's about to throw up? Morrison called, Sarah explained. Apparently something urgent about their monthly report. Mike frowned. That's weird. Didn't Derek just submit that report last week? He was bragging about how impressed they were with our numbers. A chill ran down my spine. Derek had submitted the falsified report recently, which meant Janet Walsh had only just discovered the discrepancies. This wasn't some long-brewing investigation, this was happening in real time. Through the glass, I watched Derek suddenly stop pacing. His shoulders sagged, and he sank into his chair like someone had cut his strings. Whatever Janet was telling him, it wasn't good. Then Derek did something that confirmed my worst suspicions. He hung up the phone and immediately opened a new browser window, frantically typing what looked like a Google search. Even from my desk, I could see him pulling up what appeared to be legal websites. Guys, I said quietly, I think we might have a problem. Sarah looked up from her screen. What kind of problem? Before I could answer, Derek's office door flew open and he stormed out, heading straight for the main server closet where we kept our backup files and client records. His face was pale and sweaty, and he moved with the jerky urgency of someone trying not to panic. Derek? Sarah called out. Everything okay? Fine, he snapped without looking at her. Just need to check something in the files. But nothing about this looked fine. Derek was pulling out physical folders and what looked like external hard drives, his movements increasingly frantic. At one point, he glanced toward our desks and caught me watching him. The look he gave me was pure venom. Emma, he called out, his voice artificially calm. My office. Now. I looked at Sarah, Jessica, and Mike, all of whom were now openly staring at Derek's bizarre behavior. The atmosphere in the office had shifted from normal Monday morning energy to something that felt almost dangerous. Actually, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I think I should probably call Janet Walsh back myself. You know, just to clarify any questions about the social media metrics I've been tracking. Derek went completely still. You'll do no such thing. But if there are discrepancies in our reporting, shouldn't we get them sorted out? I have all the original analytics data right here on my computer. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Mike, who usually stayed oblivious to office drama, seemed to sense that something significant was happening. Derek stepped closer to my desk, and I realized that whatever happened next was going to change everything for all of us. Derek's face went through several shades of red before settling on an alarming purple. You will not contact Morrison directly. That's completely outside your authority level. But I'm the one who compiled those engagement metrics, I said, keeping my voice steady even as my heart hammered. If Janet has questions about the data, I should be able to help clarify things. The data is fine, Derek snapped, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Janet was just confused about some formatting issues. Sarah cleared her throat. Derek, should we be concerned about losing the Morrison account? They're like 60% of our revenue. The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Derek's eyes darted between all of us, probably calculating how much damage control he'd need to do if this conversation continued. Nobody is losing anything, he said through gritted teeth. This is a minor administrative issue that I'm handling personally. But even as he spoke, his phone started ringing again. The caller ID display was visible from where I sat, Morrison Industries, Janet Walsh. Derek stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. On the second ring, he reached for it, then stopped. On the third ring, his hand actually started shaking. Derek? Jessica said tentatively. Should someone answer that? I need a minute to prepare, Derek muttered, which was possibly the least Derek-like thing I'd ever heard him say. The Derek I knew would never admit to needing preparation for anything. The phone went to voicemail, and Derek visibly flinched when a message notification chimed. Okay, what the hell is going on? Mike demanded. You're acting like Janet called to fire us or something. Derek's face went completely white. Oh my god. That's exactly what had happened. They did fire us, I said, the realization hitting me like ice water. Morrison just fired us. That's not, Derek started, but his voice cracked. It's not a firing. It's a temporary suspension while they review some procedural concerns. What kind of procedural concerns? Sarah asked, her voice rising with panic. Derek, Morrison is most of our client base. If we lose them, we're not losing them. Derek exploded, slamming his hand on the nearest desk. This is all a massive misunderstanding that will be resolved once I explain the situation properly. But I could see the truth written all over his face. Morrison hadn't just discovered discrepancies in our reporting, they'd discovered the fraud. The fake employees, the inflated metrics, probably the overbilling too. And Janet Walsh, who Derek had spent Friday's call trying to preemptively poison against me, had just delivered the death sentence. Derek's phone chimed with a text message. He glanced at it and his face somehow managed to get even paler. What does it say? I asked. It's private. But Derek's hands were shaking so badly that he fumbled the phone, and it clattered onto Sarah's desk, screen up. The text message was clearly visible. Asterisk, Derek, please confirm receipt of termination notice sent to company email. All work must cease immediately. Accounting will contact you regarding reconciliation of charges. Janet Walsh, asterisk. The office went dead silent. Sarah picked up the phone and handed it back to Derek without a word, but her expression had shifted from confusion to something approaching horror. Reconciliation of charges, Mike repeated slowly. That sounds like they think we've been overcharging them. Derek snatched his phone back, but the damage was done. It's just standard procedure when contracts end. Completely routine. Is it though? I asked quietly. Because this morning you were bragging about our 340% engagement growth for Morrison. And now they're demanding reconciliation of charges. That seems like quite a shift. Derek turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw something new in his expression. Not just anger or fear, but genuine hatred. Like I was the cause of all his problems instead of just the person who'd finally noticed them. You, he said softly. This is all because of you. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Everyone in the office was staring now, Sarah with her mouth slightly open, Jessica clutching her coffee mug like a lifeline, Mike looking back and forth between Derek and me like he was watching a tennis match. Excuse me. I said, my voice deadly calm. You heard me. Derek's voice was getting louder, more unhinged. This morning everything was fine. Then you start asking questions about metrics, digging through files you have no business accessing, and suddenly Morrison is calling with concerns about our reporting. I could feel my teammates' eyes on me, confusion and worry radiating from their direction. Derek was trying to flip the script, make me the villain in front of witnesses. Derek, Sarah said carefully, Emma's been handling the Morrison social media for months. Of course she'd have access to the metrics. Not all the metrics, Derek snapped. Not the financial reporting, not the strategic overviews, not the, he stopped abruptly, realizing he was about to admit there were things being hidden from his own team. Not the fake employee roster. I asked sweetly. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Jessica actually gasped. What fake employee roster? Mike demanded. Derek's face cycled through several expressions before settling on desperate fury. There's no fake anything. Emma is having some kind of breakdown and she's trying to drag everyone else down with her. Am I? I pulled up the org chart on my screen and rotated my laptop so everyone could see it. Because this shows 8 people in our social media department. I count 1, me. Where's Maria Santos, our supposed director? Where's Jake Williams, our content creator? Sarah leaned over to look at my screen, her face going pale as she read the names. Derek, I've never heard of any of these people. Are they made up? It's a projection. Derek's voice cracked. I told you, it's a roadmap for future hires. Future hires that you've been billing Morrison for. I asked. The question hit like a physical blow. Derek actually staggered backward a step, his face draining of what little color remained. You sent this org chart to Morrison as our current team structure, I continued relentlessly. You've been charging them for services from people who don't exist. That's fraud, Derek. It's not fraud, it's, Derek was grasping now, his usual smooth confidence completely shattered. It's creative accounting. It's how agencies manage overhead. You wouldn't understand because you're just what? My voice was ice cold. Go ahead. Tell everyone what you really think of me. Derek looked around the room, seeing the horrified faces of his remaining employees, and seemed to realize he was standing on the edge of a cliff. But instead of stepping back, he decided to jump. You're a disgruntled employee making false accusations because you're bitter about your salary adjustment, he said, his voice taking on a desperate, performative quality. I've been documenting your erratic behavior for weeks. The paranoid thinking, the inappropriate outbursts, the what? I stood up, my chair rolling backward. The discovering that you've been stealing half my wages. The finding out you've been billing our biggest client for fake employees. Which part of that is paranoid? Derek's phone rang again. Morrison Industries. This time, everyone in the office could see the caller ID. Nobody moved. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, each tone sounding like a funeral bell in the dead silence of our little office. On the 4th ring, Derek lunged for his computer mouse and began frantically clicking through windows, deleting files with the desperation of someone trying to destroy evidence. That's when I realized this was about to get much, much worse. Derek's frantic clicking stopped abruptly when Sarah stood up and walked over to his computer. Derek, she said quietly, what are you deleting? Nothing. Just cleaning up some old files. But his voice had gone up an octave, and we could all see the recycling bin icon on his screen showing dozens of recently deleted items. Mike stepped closer too, his usual laid-back demeanor replaced by something harder. Dude, if Morrison really fired us, shouldn't we be preserving everything for the transition? Not deleting it. This doesn't concern any of you, Derek snapped, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely operate the mouse. I'm handling this situation. Are you? Jessica had pulled up something on her own computer, her face growing more confused by the second. Because I just checked our client portal, and Morrison's entire project folder is showing as account suspended, billing review. The words hit the room like a sledgehammer. Sarah actually gasped. Billing review, she repeated slowly. Derek, that's what companies do when they think they've been defrauded. Derek's computer made a soft chiming sound as another email arrived. Through his monitor's reflection in the window, I could see the subject line, legal notice, Morrison Industries. Oh shit, Mike breathed. Derek, did Morrison just send us legal papers? Derek clicked frantically to close the email, but it was too late. We'd all seen enough to know this wasn't just about losing a client anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, asterisk, this is Janet Walsh from Morrison. I believe we spoke briefly about Derek's behavior last week. I think we need to have a conversation. Can you call me? Asterisk. My blood turned to ice. Derek had been so focused on destroying evidence and managing his current crisis that he'd forgotten about his preemptive character assassination attempt. Janet Walsh clearly remembered their conversation about my supposed instability, and now she was connecting the dots. Derek, I said slowly, what exactly did you tell Morrison about me last Friday? His face went completely white. I didn't tell them anything. Really? Because I just got a text from Janet Walsh asking to discuss our conversation from last week. What conversation, Derek? The office had gone dead silent except for the sound of Derek's labored breathing. Sarah, Jessica, and Mike were looking between us like spectators at the world's most uncomfortable tennis match. I may have mentioned some concerns about team dynamics, Derek admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. What kind of concerns? Just that you've been struggling lately. Having some performance issues. Performance issues? Sarah frowned. Emma's been carrying the Morrison account for months. Her work is fantastic. Derek's facade was crumbling in real time. There were other concerns. Behavioral concerns. Accusations about compensation that weren't based in reality. Compensation. Mike's voice sharpened. What about compensation? I realized this was the moment of truth. Derek had been so focused on painting me as unstable that he'd just admitted to discussing my salary complaints with our client. In front of witnesses. How much do you think I make? I asked Mike directly. He shrugged. I don't know, 60. 65. Same ballpark as the rest of us probably. $2,800 a month, I said quietly. The number hit the room like a bomb blast. Jessica's coffee mug slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor. Sarah's mouth fell open. That's impossible, Mike said. That's not even minimum wage for the hours you work. It's exactly minimum wage, I replied. Derek's been very careful about that. Derek looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting between his employees and his computer screen where another email notification had just popped up. This one from our company's business bank, with a subject line that made everyone who could see it freeze, account hold, disputed transaction inquiry. Derek, Sarah's voice was deadly calm, please tell me Morrison isn't trying to claw back payments they think were fraudulent. Derek's silence was answer enough. That's when we all realized we weren't just witnessing the collapse of Derek's lies, we were watching the entire company implode in real time. The bank notification was still glowing on Derek's screen when his office phone started ringing again. Not his cell phone this time, the main company line. The one that showed up on our business cards and website. Should someone answer that? Jessica whispered, still staring at the shattered coffee mug at her feet. Derek lunged for the phone, but his hands were shaking so badly he fumbled the receiver. Hello. Yes, I'm the owner. Even from across the room, we could hear the stern male voice on the other end. Official sounding. Legal sounding. The kind of voice that didn't call with good news. I understand, Derek was saying, his voice getting smaller with each word. Yes, I received the email. No, I need to consult with my attorney before I can. What do you mean immediately? Sarah grabbed my arm. Emma, what's happening? What's really happening? Before I could answer, Mike's computer chimed with what sounded like our entire team receiving the same email simultaneously. He opened it first, his face going ashen as he read. It's from our payroll company, he said slowly. They're suspending all services pending an investigation into irregularities in wage reporting. Jessica looked up from her broken mug. What kind of irregularities? Derek slammed the phone down so hard it echoed through the office like a gunshot. Everyone needs to stop panicking. This is just bureaucratic nonsense that happens when clients make baseless complaints. Baseless? I pulled out my phone and showed them Janet Walsh's text. Morrison's head of vendor relations wants to talk to me personally about your concerns regarding my mental state. They're not reviewing our billing because of baseless complaints, Derek. They're reviewing it because they figured out you've been lying to them. I haven't lied about anything. Really? I opened my laptop again, pulling up the Morrison files. Because I have 6 months of real analytics data right here, and it shows our actual engagement growth was 43%. Not 340%. You've been falsifying performance reports. Sarah leaned over to look at my screen, her face growing paler by the second. Derek, these numbers don't match anything you've been telling us about our success rate. Those are preliminary numbers, Derek said desperately. The real metrics include cross-platform integration and algorithmic weighting that Emma wouldn't understand. I have a marketing degree and 6 months of hands-on analytics experience, I shot back. Try me. Derek's computer chimed again. Another email, this one marked urgent, in the preview pane. He tried to close it before anyone could see, but Mike had moved close enough to read the sender, Westfield Business Bank, Fraud Investigation Unit. Fraud investigation. Mike's voice cracked. Derek, what the hell have you been doing? That's when Derek finally snapped completely. What I've been doing is building a business while all of you collect paychecks, he screamed. Do you have any idea how hard it is to keep this place afloat? The overhead, the client demands, the constant pressure to deliver results that justify what they're paying us. So you decided to just make up the results? Sarah asked, her voice deadly quiet. I adjusted the presentation to reflect our potential value delivery, Derek said, like he was reciting from some twisted business school textbook. Every agency does creative reporting. Every agency doesn't bill clients for employees that don't exist, I said. Every agency doesn't pay their workers half the agreed salary while lying to their families about being generous mentors. Derek's face twisted with pure rage. You ungrateful little. He never finished the sentence, because that's when the front door of our office opened and 2 people in business suits walked in. The kind of suits that meant serious official business. Derek Martinez, the woman asked, holding up a badge. We're with the State Labor Department. We need to speak with you about some wage and hour complaints that have been filed against your business. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Derek stood frozen behind his desk, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. There's been a mistake, he finally managed. No complaints have been filed. The woman consulted her tablet. Actually, we received a complaint this morning from Morrison Industries regarding potential wage theft affecting their vendor contracts. They're concerned about liability exposure. Morrison had filed the complaint. They weren't just firing us, they were reporting us to the authorities. Derek's empire wasn't just crumbling anymore. It was about to be investigated by the state. The Labor Department investigator spent the next hour methodically documenting everything while Derek sat in stunned silence, his empire of lies collapsing around him in real time. Sarah, Jessica, and Mike provided statements about their own pay discrepancies. Turns out Derek had been skimming from everyone, just not as brazenly as he'd been stealing from me. By Wednesday, our office was officially closed pending the investigation. Derek's business accounts were frozen, his professional licenses suspended. The local business journal ran a front-page story about the boutique marketing firm that had been operating as an elaborate fraud scheme. But the moment that made everything worth it came Thursday evening, at my family's weekly dinner. Derek wasn't there, obviously. He was probably holed up in his overpriced apartment, frantically calling lawyers and trying to figure out how to explain to his girlfriend why their lifestyle was about to take a dramatic nosedive. I can't believe it, my mom kept saying, shaking her head over her pasta. All this time we thought Derek was being so generous, giving you that opportunity. The opportunity to be exploited, my dad added grimly. He'd been quiet since I'd explained everything, processing the fact that his nephew had been systematically stealing from his daughter while accepting praise for his mentorship. I just feel so stupid, Mom continued. All those times I thanked him for believing in you and launching your career. You're not stupid, I assured her. Derek's specialty was making people see what he wanted them to see. He had everyone fooled. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet Walsh, * Emma, Morrison would like to offer you a position as social media manager. Salary starts at $68,000. Interested? *. I showed the text to my parents, watching their faces light up. 68,000. Dad whistled. That's more than Derek ever planned to pay you. That's more than Derek was billing Morrison for my work, I corrected. Turns out when you don't have to support someone's fraudulent lifestyle, there's plenty of money to pay people what they're actually worth. 3 months later, I was settled into my new role at Morrison, working with a team that valued honesty and treated employees like human beings instead of exploitable resources. Sarah had landed at a competing agency, Jessica started freelancing, and Mike was teaching himself web development. Derek? The last I heard, he was working at his uncle's insurance office in the suburbs, making cold calls for commission. The state investigation had resulted in hefty fines and a settlement that wiped out most of his assets. His professional reputation was so thoroughly destroyed that no legitimate agency would touch him. The best part, though, was running into him at a coffee shop last week. He looked diminished. Gone was the expensive cologne, the perfectly styled hair, the predatory confidence that had once made him seem so successful. Emma, he said awkwardly, clearly hoping to avoid the interaction. Derek. I smiled pleasantly. How's the insurance business? His face flushed red. It's temporary. Just until I figure out my next move. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. You always were good at creative presentations. He winced at the reference to his fraudulent reporting. Look, about everything that happened. Don't, I interrupted. We're good. Really. You gave me exactly the education you promised. As I walked away, I heard him call after me, what's that supposed to mean? I turned back with my biggest smile. You taught me exactly what I'm worth, Derek. Just not in the way you intended. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything someone tried to prevent you from being. And charging full price for it.